Welcome, everybody who is currently joining live. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining. Nice to see some familiar faces. And for those of you I don't recognize, that's okay. Welcome, welcome. Hope you get something out of this and join us again in the future. There will be a recording of this. And for anybody who has registered for it, you'll receive a link to that later on after the event is over. And I'll explain a little bit more about why we do that. Okay, my friends. So let's begin. Welcome, everybody, to another one of the Dish with Dina free monthly wellness webinars. We are in a new year. This is our first webinar for 2026. I hope everybody had a good way of celebrating, however you did. I was in my pajamas about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, missed the whole ball drop exactly as I had planned. So for me, it started off on a very relaxing foot. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining. We don't always do like a New Year kickoff on these wellness webinars, but I thought it would be important because I was kind of internalizing some things and going through my own reflection and resetting of my own. And I started looking up some information. And I'm sure this is not a surprise to anybody, but only about 9% of people who set up resolutions, who make New Year's resolutions, specifically what we call them, that really complete them. So I figured let's go back kind of to the basics here. Let's not try to do a new year, new you. Right? There's nothing wrong with who you are right now, but let's maybe try to see how we can recommit and embrace who we always have been and where we might have fallen off track a little bit as the, years have progressed, depending on what stage of life you're in, so on. So some of the objectives or the key takeaways from today's conversation are here. We're going to talk about what I call the 4 pillars of health. There are a lot more pillars of health than that, but we'll talk a little bit more about the ones specifically that are focused on this webinar. And we're going to try to include some strategizing, and I'll also share with you some factors that can shape different outcomes and behaviors, because I think it's important to know it's not always about us, right? Like we try to do the best we can with what we have, and sometimes it's really hard, and there's a lot of external factors that can set us up for, unfortunately, not being successful at what we want to do. Last but not least, so I didn't send it out ahead of time, but after this recording is done and after I submit to everybody the link to the event, you'll also receive a handout, because I'm going to start doing that in 2026. Every time we have these wellness webinars, I'm going to send out a handout that goes along with the webinar. So for today, if you happen to have something on hand, piece of paper, notebook, whatever, you can just think of things in your head. We're going to go through a little in-webinar live event activity. For anyone who is watching the recording of this, obviously, if you have registered for it, I'll explain a little bit more about that, then you'll get everything after the fact. If you're watching this later on as a recording and you didn't register for it, you can always reach out to me if you have a copy of that handout. This session is recorded. As I'm sure you heard when you logged in, we do record our sessions. These are publicly available for registration, but they are privately kept for anybody who has registered. So when we send out the recording and the other things that go along with it, like the handouts, that's really specifically for people who have been able to register ahead of time. And then in a couple of months' time, I make these publicly available to my Dish with Dina YouTube channel. We have a chat box available here for you. So if there's anything that you want to share, you can also watch this passively, totally fine if you don't want to engage actively. But as I said, I'm going to do some in-webinar activities. So I might ask you to answer some questions. You can feel free to do that if you want to. We also always carve out some time at the end of the webinar just to make sure if you do have any questions that you want to ask related to today's topic or otherwise, I'm happy to answer that later on. I am a registered dietitian, not your dietitian, as I like to say. So please make sure you are taking this and receiving this only as educational and informational. If you are planning on doing anything to your personal health, your medical diagnoses, your treatment plans, please make sure that you're checking in with your healthcare professionals and getting the go-ahead for them. And then last but not least, like I said, the webinar is being recorded. Anybody who's registered for this, you're automatically integrated into my email list. So obviously you will be in an email list, like I'll be sending out an email after this is over with the link to the recording and the handout that goes along with it. And you might receive monthly updates from me. You can always opt out at any time. I try not to inundate anybody because I know what it's like to have massive amounts of email hitting my inbox all the time. So again, you can always opt out if you want to. All right, let's get started, friends, with what's going on in this webinar. Thanks to those, again, who are joining live. Like I said, we usually get people who register. Some people come and attend the live event. Other people will watch the recording after the fact, which is totally fine. And or in a couple of months' time, this ends up becoming publicly available on my Dish with Dina YouTube channel, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So if we've never met before, although I see some familiar names on here. So if we have met before, I'll just remind you who I am and what I do. My name is Dina D'Alessandro. I have a Master of Science in Nutrition, and I am what's called a registered dietitian slash nutritionist. So I do a lot of different things. I have a private practice. I also work on campus here in New York City where I live, and I am the campus dietitian at our student health center at Lehman College in the Bronx, and I'm also an adjunct lecturer of nutrition sciences, both undergraduate and graduate. So you can see on there a bunch of other things that I do. When I was preparing for this webinar, I went down quite the rabbit hole because I was all, what is time? Right? It's a social construct. Like, who cares? You turn a page, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything starts brand new, but we do recognize that things happen on a cycle of things, obviously. So, New Year considers to be like, as far as the Gregorian calendar is concerned, 365-ish days, and we turn the page of the months and we start our weeks on Sundays or Mondays or whatever. We also recognize that, plants, botanically speaking, things die, things grow, crops plants sprout, bear fruit, etc. And there's also life cycles that happen too, right? We age progressively, we go into different periods of our life, we end up becoming more developed or more at risk for things, unfortunately, as we get older. But not everybody follows the same kind of timeline. Like, there's a lot of other calendars aside from what we use here in America or the generally acceptable Gregorian calendar. So we have like the Indian national calendar, we have the Japanese calendar, we have solar calendars, we have the Hebrew calendar. So how people determine time in their own way is all relative and arbitrary. Not necessarily arbitrary, but based on factors that are specific to them. But how do we as humans have our time be influenced? And that could be really a variety of different things. How we integrate habits. What is a simple thing to do versus a complex thing for us to do? What are our surroundings like? Am I getting interrupted all the time? Is it cold in my apartment? Do I have electricity? That sort of thing. Motivation and perseverance. I always put motivation in quotations because while personal drive, ambition, passion, whatever you want to call it, does matter, there's also external factors that we'll talk about shortly that can also play a role in the outcomes of our success. And then last but not least, consistency. How often are we doing something? Or how often are we not doing something, where that can also determine how we are successful or not so successful in our habits. Okay, give me one sec just to welcome everyone else who showed up here today. Thank you so much for being here. Next up on here, habit creation and maintenance. So what it takes for us to be able to do things like develop habits, being patient with ourselves, being compassionate with ourselves, having grace if we can. It's an easier said than done thing, unfortunately, more often than not. Expecting to make mistakes. A lot of us, like myself included, I'm very hard on myself. I tend to say I shoulda, coulda, woulda, and then it's hard for me to kind of like get back into the swing of things when I do fall off track, instead of just saying tomorrow's a new day, next meal is a new meal, just kind of set in that sense. Focusing on streaks, which I'll talk about in a second, about how habits are formed and what the average time span is for us to be able to do that. And then, of course, redefining not just success, but consistency, right? So I know in my strategy, there are going to be things that happen. I have, as I said, I teach class. So my semesters are going to change from semester to semester. My schedule is going to change. I am a caregiver, so I'm going to be running down to take care of my mom once a month, and that's going to take up a lot of my time, and I can't get things done as I normally do. Or I might be, out of sorts. I might be sick. I might be recovering from an illness or an injury, and that's going to maybe throw a wrench in my plans as well. So instead of worrying about, oh, I didn't get to something in the way that I wanted to, I try to redefine and work around those ebbs and flows that are naturally going to occur in my schedule, in my life. If you're a productivity nerd like I am, I like stuff like this, right? I like kind of adhering to these little productivity tools or these rules or habits or concepts. And so I wanted to share with you this thing called the 3-3-3 rule. And this is basically two different ways to explain this. The first one that you see on top here is just the establishment of habits. So working in these manageable chunks. If you remember from when we did, oh gosh, was that like almost 2 years ago now? We did a SMART goals webinar. It's on the YouTube channel where we talked about setting up things and developing habits and working in realistic, manageable ways. And same thing applies here too. How long it takes us just to be consistent with something, right? It takes about 3 days for us to kind of get into the zone of like, okay, I've been pretty consistent with whatever, brushing my teeth, drinking water, eating a vegetable. Then, in the next 3 weeks of a chunk of time there, consistency does start to build. That action becomes a regular part of your routine. And this is usually where people say that the stops there. Like it takes 3 weeks to make or break a habit, but that's not entirely true. There is an average that it takes somewhere up to anywhere between 18 to 254 days to really have that established, ingrained into who you are and what you do. So this is why I said be very patient with yourself when it comes to that. And then at that 3 month mark, if you are doing things particularly consistent, then in that particular case, then yeah, hopefully it'll be deeply ingrained, deeply wired. It feels natural, like things are coming natural. Doesn't mean that you might not relapse or slip up, but it's a little bit less likely for you. So if you have that 3 month mark going on there. In the case of kind of chunking it out in times and preparing yourself for ways that you can implement these habits, these routines, and adjusting your schedule, you can take a look at that second section on screen. So every day, maybe you carve out 3 hours to do deep work. You really focus on the most important things of life, or you provide yourself with, focus time. Maybe you focus on three shorter tasks that don't take up so much time and energy, and those are things that you can accomplish because you're having kind of a low energy day. Maybe you work on three what we call like maintenance tasks, like things that are no brainers, doing dishes, brushing your teeth, etc. Because in doing so, that can influence the next step of what you're doing, right? I have a decluttered space, I'm keeping things neat and efficient. And then I can move on to the next thing. Next up on screen here, we're going to talk about what I call the four pillars of health. This is kind of how I learned it way back in the day. And I just want to address there are many pillars, but I think a lot of things can fold into some of the main ones I'm sharing with you here. The first one is food and nutrition. So, as far as food and nutrition is concerned, we're talking about the why things matter. I always like to ask people, what is your why? If you are trying to focus on a different way of eating or incorporating different habits in your life that revolve around food and nutrition, why is it? We know what the research says, right? We know that it's food is like gas in a car. It's going to provide you with energy to be able to do things. And it's also going to help with managing disease or preventing things from getting worse. But why is it important for you? So if that is something that you're feeling like you want to focus on this year, the next 3 weeks, 3 months, etc., think about the why. In my case, way back in the day, I had some gastrointestinal issues. So I know if I slip up a little bit with my food, I can get by with a threshold of, okay, I feel uncomfortable. But if I do some pretty big damage to it and I don't really adhere to the diet that works for me, then I can literally and figuratively suffer the consequences of that. So let's talk a little bit about eating patterns in general, how people eat. We've talked about macronutrients and micronutrients. So calories are macronutrients, food consisting of carbs and fats and proteins. And then we've also talked about timing and balance, like how long are you going in the day before you're eating your next meal? Are you carrying with you any snacks, etc.? Next, if you are following a particular, maybe we call them trends or diet eating plans or approaches, like are you vegetarian? Are you keto based? Are there cultural influences as well? If you are Mexican, if you are Taiwanese, are there things that determine how and when you eat and the types of foods that you're eating? And or this is just a few examples of eating patterns, are you following a therapeutic diet? Do you have a chronic condition where you have to be mindful of what you're eating? So if you're dealing with diabetes or kidney disease or heart conditions, et cetera, that can be part of the role that it plays of what you take into account when you are developing your eating patterns. Next up here, some what I call the reset idea. So as I mentioned, we do have SMART goals, right? That's kind of like a larger chunk of what we're looking at for short term and long term. But I really want to start with teeny tiny things. If you want to get some paper ready or want to just mindfully think about what you'd like to do. I've given some examples here. I like to focus on what's missing. Like what do I add in versus what do I have to take out? Because odds are if I'm trying to limit or avoid something, I'm going to be thinking about that consciously and consistently. And so if I make room in my diet, on my plate, in my meals for something that's missing, odds are the other stuff that's not so great will kind of, scooch off to the side. So think of some things that here's some examples on screen, right? Add one vegetable to lunch, how many days a week for the next 3 weeks or so. That is an example of a micro goal or a SMART goal kind of on a micro scale. It could be increasing fiber, fluid, or going grocery shopping if you want to get back to meal prepping and homemade meals. I recognize too, when it comes to food and nutrition and all of these pillars, I want to stop because in every one of these webinars, I always try to incorporate conversations around what's known as the social determinants of health, meaning, as I said before, sometimes it's not our fault. Like we try the best to do what we can to manage our life and our health, etc. But a lot of times there's other external factors, whether it's income issues, whether you have a built environment where there's no food source there's no grocery store, etc., whether you are not able to physically in the time or mobile wise go shopping for yourself or cook in your home. You might not have a proper working kitchen. All of these things can play a role in how we end up being able to achieve what we want to do. That said, currently, at the time of this recording, there are some national federally funded programs and also local programs that you can reach out to. And of course, you can always reach out to your community sources too. There's a lot, like especially here in the East Village where I live in New York City, there are a lot of community organizations that are willing to help people out when it comes to food, whether it's free meals on Sundays, or we have the farmers market that people can go to, and there's a little stand there that also gives out like the remaining ends of the day, whatever's left over, they'll give stuff out for free. So really look into your community or look up things, or maybe meet with a social worker if you're really struggling to make ends meet and have enough to nourish yourself. All right, so we're going to do a little mini activity. I'm going to set the timer for 1 minute. And because of that previous interruption, I'm a little bit behind schedule here, but we're going to do the best with what we can to make sure we cover as much as possible. Think about, you don't have to share it if you don't want to, but if you want to kind of like hold yourself accountable, you can put in the chat what you are currently thinking of when it comes to food and nutrition. So let me do food and nutrition micro goal, and the timer is going. So if you want to include in the chat, cool. If not, you don't have to. I'm going to keep talking because I like to walk through this too. I very much fell off track with making food, and I do what's called like semi homemade meals. So feel free to write things down if you want to think about your food and nutrition micro goals in the coming couple of weeks. And so while I'm brainstorming my own version of this, I'm okay with buying things that are store bought. I just want to make sure they're quality good. So I don't mind buying pre-bagged salads to help me from having to chop and slice and wash things. I have a very erratic schedule, so I can't really spend a ton of time in the kitchen, but I can assemble things. And like today I made eggs, right? Eggs is a proper meal, and I took a role in that. I didn't grow chickens to make the eggs, but I was able to use what I had. All right, our minute is over. So if you feel like sharing anything in the chat, and just as a reminder, you will get the handout for this too. So what you're seeing on screen here is like a little mini version of the sections that are within the handout I'm going to send you. So what we're going to do eventually, like take a look at what you're seeing in front of you and see how that fits in. Like if you're going to have to pay more mind to something, if you're going to have to make room on your calendar or in your budget. And the last thing that's on there too, just keep remembering what are possible hiccups or things that might trip us up. Like I know for me, it's going to be time and energy. My schedules are always erratic. The subways might not be running really. That can throw my day off. And then when I come home, I'm physically and mentally exhausted sometimes. But that's okay because on those days, I don't expect much from myself. It's heat and eat, grab and go, good enough. All right, friends, let's move on to the next one. Thanks for sharing that, Dawn. I appreciate that. Okay, the next one is what is known as physical activity or movement, fitness, or however you want to term this. Why it matters in the general scheme of things is yes, as we're keeping our body active, the blood, the brain, the oxygen, everything's flowing, keeping us in balance, and it reduces a lot of different things like cholesterol levels or stress, etc. But why does it matter to you? I know why it matters to me, and if you want to add in the chat, you can. I suffer from a lot of injuries. I sneeze and I pull a muscle in my back these days, so I really try to make sure that I'm regularly active in some way, shape, or form. I don't have to go to the gym to do it. We'll talk a little bit more in a second about different types of movements, but think about how is think are there things that you want to recommit to or reset. So let's look at some types of movements. We have aerobic, right? Cardiorespiratory things. We have weight bearing exercises to help us build our muscle. Very important, especially as we age, just mobility and balance. A lot of times the people in the older life cycles fall and break a hip, and we don't want that to happen. We also recognize what's known as NEAT, N-E-A-T, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the daily stuff, right? The daily stuff, getting up to do the dishes, walking to go to the bathroom, like all of those things do count for something, even if you're not hitting a heart rate goal or a weightlifting goal or anything like that. Yeah, bone health, exactly, Don, exactly. Thank you, Latoya, for adding in that too. Perfect. And also modified things, whether you have an actual born with physical limitation or disability, whether you are recovering from an illness or an injury that has put you mobile wise out of commission in some way, or whether you have an age related issue, like, your knees, arthritis, everything, all the fun stuff starts kicking in after a certain age, however you define activity, we just want to make sure that you are staying moving and liquid fluid in some way. I put a little note on here, like maybe aim to increase stamina, maybe just get that endurance level up. So you're not trying to for those of you who, like me, I don't love going to the gym, but I will because they have the machines that I don't have at home. But I can also do stuff at home. Like stretching for me is a big, big thing. I have to, have to, have to. And I think it takes me 12 minutes. Okay, if I don't have 12 minutes a day to set aside for stretching, we got real problems, my friend. So take a look at some of the ideas here that I'm giving you as examples. What might be one of your quote unquote micro goals that you want to set up for yourself? And how do you want to put that in action? So think in a second as I advance to the next slide, where I share again just kind of a conscientious rundown of some of the potential social determinants of health. We just got done talking about mobility, income. You don't have to join a gym, but if that's really where you feel like you want to go and your gym is $20 or $200 a month, that could really make or break your budget depending on who you are and what you do and what your constraints are. Speaking of constraints, time, a big thing is always, I don't have the time to do this, or I'm running all over the place, or I work 3 jobs, or I'm taking care of my kids. So, think about again those barriers that might happen, and then consider some of the resources that might be available to you. In New York City, we have Shape Up NYC. So you could look up online in the Parks and Rec department of the website and you can check out places that are done for free. Like there's a Tai Chi workout group that meets in the East Side, little things like a Y Center that might be a low cost alternative. So a lot of these things, or even community centers that have like, senior centers, things like that, that you can go in that are free or low cost, or apps. I love the Fit On app. I don't get any paycheck from them, but I love, love, love it because they have duration, intensity, mobility, age related, a lot of different things on that app that you can download for free if you have a cell phone and be able to utilize that in some way, shape, or form that might fit your schedule, etc. So again, now we're coming up on, let's do a little 1 minute act. How are we doing on time? We're good. A little 1 minute activity. Think about your physical activity goals, your ideas, anything that you've been meaning to do but haven't done, anything that's not really bringing you joy anymore, right? Like, why am I going to this kickboxing class? I hate it. Stop going. Don't go to it. Do something else with your life if you feel like you would rather do something that makes you happier. So I'm going to keep talking through my end of things. And while I'm doing that, you can take the next, 30 seconds or so to think about your micro goal. What can you do between now and the next few weeks, few months? What steps do you need to take? Like, I'm a huge fan of setting out my clothes the night before, making sure I have my sneakers out if I want to go for a walk, so there's no like friction, no reason for me to be like, oh, I can't do it because my clothes are all in the laundry. Okay, no, because they're out there now and I can access them. And any possible barriers or solutions. So, is there a physical disability issue? Are you exhausted? Is your gym closed at a certain time and you never make it? Latoya says, I'm going to start a walking plan. I love that. Latoya, are you a solo flyer or do you like group activities? Like, I don't mind buddying up with people, but I don't like classes. So, do you like being in a group or like, are you planning on just doing this yourself? And I also love the 10 minutes of meditation and deep breathing. We're going to talk about stress management in a second. Oh, I love that too, Michelle. Yeah, yeah. Oh, look at you coming from Ohio. I forgot to even ask where everybody's tuning in from. Thanks, Michelle, for chiming in there too. Yeah, again, if you want to throw in the chat, just kind of like hold yourself accountable or say it out, speak it into existence, feel free
Yeah,
to do so. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I do want to really start the walking plan mainly because I am overweight. And there were classes that I did in the past where I tried like bar and even yoga.
Yeah.
I realized that my weight was always like getting in the way of me being able to do like certain movements. And
Okay.
it was frustrating because, like, in my mind, I wanted to be able to do these things, but my
Right.
body just wasn't. So I said, you know what? I need to drop the weight. Even when I went walking, right, I realized that, wow, I'm totally like out of shape. Like, I need to really like build up my wind. So I walked at this park and I did like about like 4 laps around. And it seemed like the longer I walked, the better it got. But
Right.
I just have to be mindful of my ankles and stuff like that because of my weight. I've really let myself go. So, like you were saying, do I do it by myself or do I do it with a group? For right now, because I won't really keep up with the pace of a group,
Right.
kind of have to go at my own pace. So, even though I may want to walk with others, I know that, my pace is just really slow. And once I really build up my stamina and my wind, then I'll be able to probably keep up with like a group because I have a walking group that I joined. It's just that and they're really supportive. They're like, hey, just walk at your own pace.
Yeah.
We're here.
I love that, Latoya. So you still have the social support, but you're still able to act independently if you want to. And
Hmm.
this way also, like I was saying before, with defining consistency and success, if I feel like I'm going to be like in competition with people who are much faster than I am, I'm going to be like, this is not making me feel good. So I might
Right.
want to DIY it. And then
Hmm.
maybe, I work up to like maybe in 5 years I run a marathon with everybody. But right now I'm just taking a walk around the block. I want to share with you, not just you, Latoya, anyone else with physical activity goals. And by the way, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to put something in the chat here with the caveat of disclaimer that I am not, I don't know how to do anything personal training wise. I'm not qualified to talk about that exercise movement. I don't have a degree in any of that. But if you are medically cleared to move around, this could be another way that you kind of determine or define success is how, like, again, the increasing your stamina, getting your heart strength up there, and being able to endure whether it's frequency, duration, or intensity of movement. So if you happen to wear a watch or a wearable, that's easy. Or you could do the old-fashioned way where you put your fingers on your neck and you count the beats per minute. So one of the guidelines here is you take the number 220, you subtract your age. I'm going to do that right now for all of us, right? I'm taking 220. I'm subtracting my age. I'm going to be 57 next month. So that is for me, my maximum beats per minute is 163. I got to be honest, if I hit that, I'm probably going to pass out or need to sit down or maybe, call an ambulance. But I can take a min and like a low end and a high end of a range that is much more realistic for me. So I can take that 163 and I multiply it by zero point 0.6, which is 60% of that number. And that's 98 beats per minute. 98 beats per minute is what I do when I'm doing laundry. Like I've hit that goal plenty of times when 2 hours of going up and down the stairs. Or I can take a higher end of it and take 80% of that 163. And that brings me to about 130-ish beats per minute. And that's something that I've seen if I'm on a treadmill, either running on a low speed or if I incline kind of high, right? Like on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm at like a 4 to 6. I can hit 130 no problem. So for me, because I know I don't love working out, that if I want to set up a goal for myself, it's not about me running 30 minutes at whatever speed. It's more about can I hit that target low and high end range and keep it there and then recover from it because that tells me that my heart is building up stamina. So I'm sharing that little guidance with everybody because I know, and Latoya, in your case too, because you mentioned weight, and weight is something that comes up a lot, especially in the New Year discussions with goal setting and stuff, that it's not always just about scale victories, about non-scale victories. So I really want to focus on, how is my body doing? Like the body composition, body fat and muscles aside, how is my actual internal organs? Like how are they picking up and doing that? So hopefully that's helpful too. if anybody wants to take a screenshot of that, or, obviously this will be recorded and you can listen to this again. Dawn, I love that too. The strength training. Okay, the meal adjustments there too, and work schedule adjustments. Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate that, everybody. Moving on to the next pillar of health, mental health. Mental health, let me get my notes out here. I'm a big, big advocate for this conversation because I never shy away from sharing with people that I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And I've been in and out of therapy. I've been on and off meds. I really, really love talking about it because I think it breaks down the stigma. And that is the issue around stress and mental health. People sometimes don't like to talk about it. And or it's often overlooked. Like they'll go, oh, everybody gets frustrated or everybody gets overwhelmed. But it's like, is it? Or like, do I need some proper support? So take a look at where your mental health approaches are right now. What is your goal in this particular pillar here? What are you planning on doing and the why of it? So for me, I know when I let myself get overwhelmed by things, I mean, I could be out of commission for an entire week. I don't shower. My hygiene goes to pot. I'll call out sick for days on end, and I'll get really, really in the deep depression. And I don't love that. So at the tender age of 57-ish now, I have understood what my strategies are for it, and I recognize my why. I don't want to end up, worst case scenario, hurting myself or being out of commission in that sense and not really enjoying life. I want to be able to be actively involved in things in the more physiological sense of things, moving around, yes, but also stress management helps with decreasing our blood pressure. A lot of people think, food is related to blood pressure, and it is, but so is being agitated all the time. So take a look at the why for you. Why does stress management or mental health support matter for you? Some of the strategies here, like somebody mentioned before, right? Deep breathing exercises, a mindful approach to something. I mean, I know when I'm kind of out of my sorts, I'll trip, I'll hurt myself, I'll stub my toe, and that's immediately an indication like I got to pay attention to myself. Okay, boundary setting, that's a huge thing too. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to say, I'm shutting off the computer. Nobody talk to me. I'm not answering emails after a certain time. Digital detox, digital hygiene. I have a love, hate relationship with all of my social media accounts. I currently deleted everything off of my phone. I'm only on YouTube at this point, but sometimes it's a necessary evil for what I do, but I really try to digitally detox as best as I can. So think about some of the things that you want to do. So there are some examples of some resetting micro goals. Maybe you say yes to only two things a month. Like, your social calendar is out of control and it's stressing you out financially, otherwise too. Maybe you want to schedule in some of that breathing. Again, in the interest of time, I'm just going to go over to discuss the determinants of health, just like anything, economic instability, financial issues, caregiving issues, your neighborhood environment, the way people treat you, your social support, etc. A lot of these things obviously are systemic. If you do find yourself struggling, right, the substance abuse and mental health hotline, that's the 988 hotline number, suicide prevention. I've called that twice in my life. I'm not ashamed to talk that about like I need support. I reach out to my friends. I have a therapist. I try to make sure that I invest in my mental health. So maybe that's something too. Maybe you need to kind of decrease some of the stress that's in your life. Maybe you need to cut out some of the toxic humans, things that no longer serve you, jobs, whatever it is that you're able to do. And if you need any help or support, there are definitely organizations available on the local level and on the national level to reach out to. This could be more of a sensitive topic. So if you don't necessarily feel like sharing your micro goal, I'm still going to set the timer anyway, your micro goal for what your mental health or stress management goals are going to be. Take a minute just to kind of think of things through. For me, in the 1 minute, 46 seconds that we have, I keep focusing on the stimulants in my life. Like I just cannot be buzzing at this level all the time. And so I've just downshifted and I don't even apologize anymore. I think that's also the beauty that comes with being 50 something years old. It's like, I don't care. I say no. If I can't get to your email in, 30 minutes or whatever, I'm just not going to get to it and you'll have to email me back a reminder or I'll get to it when I get to it on the weekend when I have more time. I really am trying to focus more on quality over quantity and I'm really trying to be very protective of my brain health and my schedule. So I'm downshifting. I ended up for anybody who's been following me for a while, I had a podcast for 5.5 years. I loved doing it, but oh my gosh, that took a lot of time out of my life. And so I stopped. I had to say, thank you very much. RIP my podcast. I will do other things that make me feel like I'm leaving a legacy in some way, shape, or form, like stuff like this. But I can't commit to doing the podcast anymore. Yeah, there you go, Latoya. Yep, do not disturb. I'm out of commission. I'm on vacation. See you later. Nothing is that important. I mean, I'm not an on-call cardiologist, so we're good. Okay, pillar four. Let's wrap it up with what I think is the most important of all of the factors here, of all of your pillars, your sleep hygiene, whether it's naps or, the X 7 to 9 hours that we're supposed to get every single night. Why it matters to you. Are you waking up refreshed? Are you tossing and turning? I am, 6 years into my menopause life, my menopause chapter, so I've had to accommodate some of those challenges as well, which affected some of my sleep. I used to have insomnia very, very badly. But what we know about sleep, especially long-term and patterns of disruptions, both quality and quantity, is it can really affect our cognitive health. So you are more at risk for things like dementia and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, etc., if your sleep is not in check. And that's not to say that you're going to get it by not sleeping, but the point is, just like anything, just being aware of things like that. By the way, we do have webinars on Alzheimer's disease specifically, brain health as well, and we also had an ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. Again, that's a neurodegenerative disorder. Sleep plays a role in there too. But think about your why. Why does sleep matter to you? And maybe sleep is being affected in a variety of different ways, but what do you want to kind of do a little bit of a deep dive in when we get to it, a micro goal? Think about, is coffee keeping you up? Is it the timing? Is it light exposure? You need a better room environment. Wind down habits are big with me too. I love putting a timer on and being like, I gotta start winding down. And general environment too, like loud noises, other people in the house that might be disrupting your sleep, etc. Yeah, exactly. Yep, getting your husband exactly. Right. So you have other the TikTok, yeah, all the scrolling things, the things that take place in this discussion. Thank you for sharing it. So take a look at these next few micro goals. Again, these are just examples. I'm sure you can come up with your own ideas of what you want to do, but think about what you might want to commit to and how you might want to be accountable for this stuff too. So maybe it's going to bed a little bit earlier. Maybe it's setting an alarm. Maybe it's stopping drinking. Maybe it's shutting down the screens. I mean, I tend to come home from work and then I eat and then I'll, depending on the day, and then I'll jump online and be like, I gotta catch up on, emails and prepare for the next day. But I try to fit that in my schedule. And like I said, if it doesn't happen, I'm just going to push it off to the next day. I can't sacrifice my sleep. I cannot. All right, let's talk about the social determinants of health here too. Again, just giving props to understanding people got stuff to do, right? Everybody's juggling everything. We all have responsibilities. You might have shift work, or like me, and like some of us here too, a lot of my students pop on here too. Like you're going for your undergrad degree or your master's program, or you're in an internship and you're barely sleeping 3 hours a night, and then you're trying to work on the weekends. I mean, it's a lot of stuff to juggle. And also other things that happen regarding around sleep. There's definitely free apps. There's, as you can see here, some of the organizations that focus on quality sleep or maybe even doing a sleep study if that's something that you feel is really, really problematic. As we're winding down towards the end of our conversation, thanks again for everybody who's joining live. This has been like probably the most chatty group I've had in a while, which is nice. Sometimes people kind of hang out passively, but I appreciate everybody's conversation in the chat. Yeah, decreasing the phone game, stuck trying to reach those goals, achieve nothing right. Exactly. Michelle, if anything, I feel very proud of you. I don't know if we know each other very well, but I feel very proud of you for being so self-aware right now. I hope that this has been helpful for everybody to come into terms of what you think you want to do. So I'm talking through the 1 minute right now. Think about what kind of micro goal, the steps you're going to take. Maybe you have to rely on other people too, right? Like kids, I need lights out at 9 o'clock, enough with bothering mommy. Or the screen stuff, right? Put an app on your phone, throw your phone across the hall. I don't know, whatever. Barriers and solutions too, right? If you toss and turn, if you get up to pee, if you have hot flashes, can you go right back to sleep? Can you put on some white noise or whatever to kind of like sound you off? That's something that I wrote down too. Like I love YouTube for a lot of reasons. And I like, they have, obviously free videos like those lo-fi chill vibe, loungy things that help me with like when I'm trying to focus and be productive, but they also help me with white noise and things like that going to sleep. So sometimes I'll just put that out in the background or like birds chirping or whatever. I live in New York, so it's a little bit hard to get quiet around here. You make do with what you got. But again, free, options, apps, etc., resources available. Thank you, Latoya. All right. At the end of every webinar, for those of you who've joined me regularly in these things, because this is coming up on, I think, 4 years of consistent monthly webinars that I do, I always ask you to start, keep, stop. Think about that. We've been doing that kind of in today's webinar along the way. We've been coming up with ideas of habit forming things and what we want to, maybe get rid of that doesn't serve us. But think about what the next steps are for you. What's something that you want? Okay, committing, it doesn't have to be Monday. It doesn't have to be February 1st. It can be literally as soon as you log off today of what's the next thing you want to start. What's something that you've been doing that you just want to keep doing, do more regularly? How are you defining consistency? How are you defining success? And what's the stuff that's no longer serving you? Cut that out. Off it goes, kids. We don't want any problems in our life from this point forward. All right, I'm going to wrap up with a few things before we will still take some time if you have any questions. I need to get off in about 8 minutes or so. But our next webinar, so I try to do this on the second Thursday of every month. So Heart Health, February is Heart Health Awareness Month. And we've done heart health every February, but we sometimes pick and choose what kind of approach we're taking. So next month, we're going to specifically talk about high blood pressure, something I am very familiar with because I struggle with it, as does my mom. And so we're going to talk about blood pressure, risk factors, etc., management, treatment, etc. That's on Thursday, February 12th from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, you can always register. If you can't make it live, that's totally fine. We'll record it. I said before, it takes like 6 to 10 hours to put these webinars together, which I love doing because I like educating people and informing people, and it helps also make me feel relevant and current. So here's how you can support me. Go subscribe to my YouTube channel. Go, or even if you don't want to subscribe to anything, go check out. There's a whole playlist. There's the podcast interviews that I did. I used to do them only in audio and then I switched to video too. So there's a ton of like people I have interviewed that you might connect with. We have a whole wellness webinar playlist too from 2021, 23, I forget. So we've been doing these pretty consistently. I say we because sometimes I have interns and students that help me put these things together and they help me research and coordinate all this stuff together. But I try to do a wide variety of topics. And so at the end, when I send out all the thank yous and stuff and the links, you'll also get a link to a survey that if you want to share with me what you're curious about or want to learn more about, you can throw that in the survey as well and say, I'd love to learn more about XYZ, or maybe I already have a webinar for you. Another way, so I mentioned before that I do private practice nutrition counseling. I work with a wide variety of patient populations, different ages. It is 100% telehealth. And because of the way that state rules and regulations are, I take insurance too. So I do insurance based and self-pay. But because of the way that state regulations are, I can't meet with everybody in every state. But I think I can meet with people in like 10 states or so. So you can always check out my website, scroll through there, see if I'm a good fit. Or maybe you want to, send me to someone, refer me to somebody else that's in your circle. Like I said, I work with a wide variety of people. And I mentioned before, I'm the nutritionist on campus. So I work with our student population, and the age ranges on campus are from 18 to 60 something. So I really see such a wide variety. I don't specialize in anything. So if people do need a little bit more guidance on a specialty area, I'm happy to refer people out because I've amassed, 9, 10 years of my life as being a dietitian. This is a second career for me, by the way. I've amassed quite a large connection network that I really feel comfortable with sending people out. All right, listen, at the end of everything, I also like to just give props to the researchers and the teachers and the blog post writers and all of the places that I go to. So I'm just scrolling through my references section to give you an idea of what we put together. And I'm just going to back out of here and say thank you again to everybody. It's been a pleasure having you all here. I really appreciate your time and your energy. And hopefully I'll see you again next month.